So we're doing day 10 in there, but we're just talking about this whole idea of attitude. What we'll see in the video, we're talking about like finishing and things like that. So our icebreaker question today is like, would you describe yourself as someone who starts strong or finishes strong? What do you think? And he goes, how would you describe yourself? I'm definitely a starter. Like that's the things I'm always have to work on is finishing. You know, I'm a starter.
Once I start something, I have to finish it.
Okay.
But I do an awful lot of planning before I start.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add to it?
I'm like, and
You're with him? You plan a lot before you do something?
Yeah. And then, once I get going, then you have to finish it, don't you? Or like a crazy person.
Oh, yeah.
But are you finishing it with a smile?
Yeah. I like that. Like, what did you say, Lee?
Are you finishing it with a smile?
Are you finishing with a smile?
Yeah, a lot of times, you start in real hard and then as it starts to get a bit more difficult, you suddenly back off.
Yeah.
she's ugly, dude.
No. Yeah. So that's,
I think I'm equal.
you're equal?
Yeah,
Very
I
much.
I'm structural art.
It's,
What are you?
I don't know. I don't think of myself that way, I guess. You discuss what you
I like that answer, actually. I like that. That's funny. It's, I know I start showing, it's my biggest challenge is I get more of this stuff. And keeping going. That's my, as we go into adulthood and all that stuff, that would be always my things that I have to work on is keeping going with start. All right, well, let's watch Zach's video and some of the verses that we have chosen today. I'm excited about talking about things. Remember, we're talking about attitude. All right, so we're going to share it from the computer here. We're going to optimize sharing. And then with that tab right there.
Welcome back to Serving Challenge. When I was in middle school, I loved basketball, but there was a major problem for me. I went to a middle school with several hundred kids in my grade, and I was the third tiniest boy. So my height was already bringing me to a disadvantage. So if my height was going to be a disadvantage, I was determined to make up for it in other areas. Going into tryouts that year, I wanted to come in on fire, in shape, guns blazing, ready to go, to impress the coaches and ultimately to make the basketball team. So the season right before basketball was cross country. And I'm not a cross country runner. I'm not really a runner at all. I've never liked running. I'll do it today from time to time, but the people that actually like running, can we just admit they're weird? But I wanted to do it to get in good shape for basketball. So I signed up for cross country. And again, not the best. I would usually finish in like the back third of the pack. Nothing to write home about, but it was a means to an end. Even in the practices, I didn't really try hard. I kind of goofed off. But then once the first meet came and I struggled, well, something came into me where all of a sudden in the middle of the season, I wanted to win. And those that know me well have diagnosed me with this word called competitive. So we were coming up on the last race of the year. It was against our rival middle school on the very land that I'm filming this video. And the night before the race, I kid you not, I had a dream and I felt like God gave me a very clear vision for how to run the race. And here was the vision. To win the race, all you need to do is run faster than everyone else. Just run faster. And I thought, that's easy. Why hasn't anyone thought of this idea before? Runners just must not be very smart. And so I didn't tell anyone my strategy because I didn't want anyone knowing my secret. I didn't even tell my coach. So that day, the strategy was simple. Run as fast out of the gate as possible and get out in front of everybody else. Then when you see runners coming behind you, I would just run faster and stay in front and don't let them pass. That was the vision. Run as hard as I can and hold everybody off. So the gun goes off and I'm blazing out of the gate. I am sprinting and everybody else is jogging. I get this really wide lead on the rest of the pack and I can't see anyone behind me. I even hear some in the crowd muttering, "Who's this new kid? Where did he come from?" And I'm a mile into this 5K and just completely dominating. Nobody's close. Then, about 2 minutes later, it started getting really hard for me. The other runners all of a sudden started gaining on me, but I kept running. And then about another 2 minutes, halfway done with the 5K, they were quickly approaching me. No worries though, right? This is when my strategy, my vision, my dream would come into reality. I just have to run faster. But something happened at that moment. My legs and my breathing couldn't match the great vision that God had given to me. You probably know what's going to happen next, right? Well, it turns out this vision wasn't really from God, because I couldn't hold these runners off any longer. They began to pass me. So no joke, mile 1, I was in first place, but by mile 2, I'm literally dead last, and now I have a new goal. Do you know what it is? Don't finish last. So as my silly running story illustrates, it's extremely important how you start something. Sometimes when it comes to serving, which is primarily seen as this outer work, we can think we'll just do better, or we'll try harder, or we'll grit it out, just become a better servant. But I don't believe that's an appropriate attitude that will serve us long term. Maybe you can start something with that attitude, but you won't have the stamina and strength to keep going. So if any of us are having a problem serving on the outside, likely something is wrong on the inside. Before the Apostle Paul jumps to how Jesus served us or what he did to serve us, he reminds us that serving starts with the mindset. Other translations say the attitude of Jesus. Check it out from Philippians 2 verse 5. Paul says, "In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus." And so how's your mindset? How's your attitude? If we're honest, more so today than previous decades or generations, we are struggling on the inside right now. Our collective mental health has been shattered, and while there's some debate in the medical field, many experts believe that much of our mental health stems from functions in the brain. And if you look at what is happening in your brain right now, it's quite fascinating. There's a lot going on. In fact, according to the National Science Foundation, the average person has between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts every single day. Of those thoughts, check out these numbers. Studies have found this, that 80%, 4 out of 5, are negative thoughts. This one's shocking, 12%. So 1 out of every 8 thoughts we have are comparative. And when you combine all your thoughts, 95% of them are repetitive thoughts, which means that for the majority of us, we are just repeating the same negative and comparative thoughts in our head over and over and over again. The more you look into new research like this, it's easy to see why things like mental health, anxiety, and worry are all issues in today's world. And if that were the end of the story, it'd be depressing, but it's not the end. Not only can you change your mind, but you can change your life. And no, that's not some Oprah New Age type of thinking. It's actually quite biblical. Romans 12 verse 2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And so how do we renew our mind? How do we change our attitude to ensure that as we serve, our serving is coming from the right place? If our goal is to have a mindset or an attitude like Jesus, let's explore his attitude. What was his attitude? What's his primary attitude or mindset towards you? I wonder what you think God thinks of you. I've heard many people ask a question posed like this before. How can God be both loving and just at the same time? Or how can he possess both love and wrath? It's a huge question, and to be fair, the anger of God, oftentimes shown through his justice, is a tricky subject. There are many biblical references to God's anger. We even have stories of even Jesus being angry and turning tables over and spewing out curses at times. And so how do we deal with this? Because we can see or read about God's anger, I think there are too many people out there that have this incomplete or misinformed idea then that God is predominantly angry with them. So while his anger is real, I think though we have to look at what's behind that anger. And the more you look at it, you see that even his anger is fueled by love. Anger isn't his predominant mindset, it's love. Look at this verse, first shared in Exodus. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. Did you hear that? God is slow to anger, but he abounds in love. His anger is not quick-tempered, and it's not without merit. In fact, when you look at the anger of God, even and especially in the life of Jesus, it is always squarely centered against one thing: sin, disobedience. And for God to truly be loving, he kind of has to hate sin and fight against it, right? But his predominant attitude and mindset towards you and me is not anger, it's love, and it's shown in Jesus. When we look to God, specifically shown in and through the person of Jesus, we see that it's far more common that Jesus is not mad, but madly in love with you. And he'll do whatever it takes to right the wrongs in this world, even at great personal cost to him. He willingly, time after time, lowers himself to serve you and I. At one point, Jesus even reminded us that like nobody's forcing me to do this. I'm doing it and giving my life on my own accord because he loves you. It's that plain and simple. A lot of Christians can quote John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life." Now, the reason this verse sticks with us is because ultimately it speaks about a God who loves his world. And you're included in that world. Human beings are the apple of his eye, his prized possession. Out of all creation, God only stopped and declared very good once. And that was after creating mankind. You are fearfully and wonderfully made by God, and he loves you. Do you believe this? See, when humankind collectively had so far failed our God, he was not content to let humanity destroy itself. And so what did he do? He sent Jesus into this world to come and rescue us. His anger didn't win the day, his love did. Jesus didn't even wait for us to clean up our lives or get our act together. He came while we were a mess. Romans 5:8 says it this way: God demonstrated his love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. When he died on the cross, not only did he willingly do it, but the author of Hebrews said he, as he was enduring this brutal death, did it with joy, with the joy set before him. And what was that joy? That one day, you, me, and all who believe in him, along with all of his creation, would be rightly restored to him. He didn't serve us because he had to or because he was forced to. He served us because he loves us. And it's his love that we receive that now is the motivation that keeps us going all the way to the end. Speaking of the end, I know you want to know how my story ends. And so I had a new goal, right? Don't finish last. My pride was at stake here. But I had some work to do because it turns out when you sprint the first mile, you don't have much energy left for the final two. So I noticed one kid looking like he was really struggling, and with less than a quarter mile to go, I got him in my crosshairs. I'm not going to let him beat me. I got the will to win. I run as fast as I can. And sure enough, I end up passing him just at the end, and I finished second to last. Aren't you proud of me? It turns out I later learned the reason the kid was struggling so much is because he was in the middle of having an asthma attack. So I beat a kid that had an asthma attack. Well done, Zach. And then, to add further insult to injury, actually missed basketball tryouts the month after, no joke, because I cut the tip of my finger off with the scissors trying to earn extra credit in a geometry project. Middle school years, just such interesting years, right? So as ridiculous as my running strategy was that day, I learned a lesson in that race I'll never forget. Our strength can only take us so far. We have to be fueled by something other than our strength. And so on this journey where we're going to serve like Jesus, where does your strength come from? What is your fuel? Before we're going to get to the how and the what of serving, why are you even serving in the first place? If it's to check enough boxes to earn God's favor, you're going to burn out and realize you can never do this impossible task. If it's because you feel obligated to serve, you're going to end up exhausted. If, however, it's because you are so grateful that God would come down into your mess, and lower himself to death by crucifixion, that when he raised himself up to new life, you were raised to new life as well, then you're going to have enough fuel to serve all the days of your life. Because we serve because we were first served. We love because we were first loved.
So full screen, start sharing. Okay. All right. So as we talk about here, something we kind of talk about is that there seems to be just some struggle in some of our serving. I actually kind of like his point at the end is that when we serve in order to kind of get something for ourselves and check off the boxes or something like that, that at least I found it in my life, that's when it really starts falling apart. Because when the way I see it is that when we're serving out of gratefulness or something like that, there's not a lot writing on it. And we can back off a little bit too. You know, it's like that. There's so much pressure when we feel like that's going to be what saves us. And I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts about that? Like you're thoughtless. There's I've heard that from some people, but like that's I don't know. We'll go on to the next question. This one's good. We have some Bible stuff I want to get into as well. To be more effective at serving like Jesus, it's not about doing better, trying harder, or gritting it out. Rather, many of our serving problems starts on the inside. And you see that in Philippians chapter 2, where we talked about that last week. That says that in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. That it's in kind of getting into like where was Jesus? Where are we doing all of this stuff? So when we think about that mindset of Jesus, that attitude of Jesus there, what are the top 3 words that come to mind to you that describe the mindset of Jesus? And why did you choose those words? So what are the words when you think of the mindset of Jesus? What do you think of?
Consistency.
Consistency. Why are you saying consistency?
Well, he went through hell for us. You can't be any more consistent than that.
Okay. And so
And he did it on our level.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, the most precious gift is life.
Yeah.
He gave it up. He gave it up in a horrible way.
Yeah.
For someone living under Roman rule, crucifixion was the absolute worst that could happen to you.
Yeah.
And that's the way he did it.
Yeah. I like where you're thinking, and the way that you're describing that as consistency is interesting. Because that's why I wanted you to find that word, because that's you see this consistency in God went to the bottom for you. It's kind of how I usually talk about it. You know, like and you're talking about the crucifixion and all that stuff, that He consistently loves us now. That's cool. That's cool. Any others from anyone else?
He was a servant.
Servant? Like you want to add to that at all? Not any words, but like.
Well, I mean, he did it on a grateful heart, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And when I try to serve people,
Yeah.
it's from a place of gratitude.
Yeah.
From our life.
Because that's kind of the point of this whole thing, is that especially this attitude part is that
Attitude of gratitude.
attitude of gratitude. Oh, that should have been in the sermon last week. You should have said that a week ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, no, that's good. That's the attitude of
Well,
gratitude.
my 12-step program is big into attitude. of
Okay.
gratitude.
Can you elaborate on that anymore?
Like what?
Oh, I don't know. Like just you mentioned the 12 step. Like what's their?
Do you know what a 12-step program is?
Yeah, yeah,
Is everybody in here?
yeah.
Right, okay. Well, I'm a member of the of AA,
Mm-hmm.
and I was an addiction therapist for a long time. But in order to alcoholism is a disease of the mind as well as
Yeah,
doing the act of drinking or using drugs,
Mhm.
addiction.
yeah.
And an attitude. So you really have to change your thought,
Mhm.
your thinking, and so the 12 steps helps you do that.
Yeah.
And I would love to see the church go through the 12 steps because they're biblically based.
Mhm. Yeah, that would be.
It'd be just interesting. It's a way of life.
Mhm.
The first few steps are being able to admit that you have a problem.
Mhm.
Then you come to believe and that God can help you
Mhm.
with this problem. And then you have to look at your character defects, which is not fun.
Mhm.
And you have a sponsor and throughout this, and you do that, and then you ask God to remove these shortcomings, and then you make a list of people that you've harmed, and then you need to deal with that. You need to go back and to some of the people and make restitution to them. And then after that, 10, 11, and 12 is the way we live our life. Continue to take personal inventory and wrongly, promptly admitted it when you do something, say something, do something, you own it. I mean, as fast as you can. And 11 is thought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand Him. Praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. How can that be more biblically?
Mhm.
And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we practice these principles in our affairs and help others
Mhm.
to achieve sobriety. So our whole mission is service.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's exactly what
I
we're
could
doing
see-
here.
Yeah, I can see exactly what you're talking about when you said attitude of gratitude. Like that's just a quippy phrase around that. But no, and I've had a conversation like this with you in the past, and I'm having the same. Like we should talk at some point and get some things down because that would make an interesting series to go through.
Ricker?
And so let's talk about that in the future.
It's pretty.
You can remind.
It's
you can
pretty.
remind-
It's pretty introspection. I wonder if our congregation is ready for that much introspection.
Yeah. No, it'd be good to talk. It'd be good to talk to you about it. Yeah. So like that's
And the 12 steps is not just for the addicted person. It's for the people that live with the addicted person or no one, family members. I mean, we call that codependency.
Mhm. Well,
And I'm in a group
yeah.
that are working with codependency and people.
When your big group is big too.
I have but then we have Wits End, which is another. And I think I'm going to have the founder of that come and speak to our women's group
Yeah.
at the church. I'd love for them to hear
Mhm.
more about that.
That'd be
So
good.
that's something we're going to try to do maybe in the
Good.
spring.
Because a big flavor of my kind of viewing of sin and all this stuff is that we all have like different like addictions to little things, to different.
Oh, yeah.
It may not be substances, but it's
Yeah.
ways we view people, ways that it could be eating things.
Sure.
And I think the church's stance on confession and all that stuff has a lot of legitimacy to what you're
Absolutely.
to what you're saying, and kind of realizing it's like, oh, I'm not God, but God loves me. And that's a big part of the flavor of how I try to present everything. So that's good.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, like that's really how, I don't know. And it's been a road to get to this place where I really view the gospel now is a gift that's a gift that for so long it was all about me trying to convince someone else of a way of belief. And it's like at some point I realized I wasn't good enough for myself. And I realized it was all just a gift. So I just try to give and then encourage other people now to just give it away. And so that's kind of what I see is what Zach is kind of trying to do. And like, I think it's his description of the attitude of like just trying harder, which is really funny. It's like, this is recorded. It'll be, no one watches this. I was just talking to Vance, this pastor's conference, one of the speakers, it was like he was just telling us, just be better, just be better, just be better. And like, there was no like, how? You know, like give us some strategies, you know? We're all professionals in here. You know, like there's not too many people that are dumb in the room. Like that's like, I'm not going to say that we're all not. I wasn't there, but yeah, like that's trying to make all these things. Do you want to say anything?
No.
Okay. You were just,
Well, the thing that I was thinking about when you said attitude, gratitude, I went through this. I went through a downturn in my life at one point, and one of the things that I was turned on to was a blog writer that, and probably me know this lady, but anyway, she generally writes to women about their lives, but I was told that she could help with might be one of the things she talked about was when you're having trouble going to sleep at night, and you're thinking about all the things you did wrong. She said, start writing down the things that were right today. Like the things that you're grateful for.
Exactly. We did that.
And if you start thinking about the things that are right and the things that you're grateful for that day, you tend to push out the things that are negative.
Very good.
And we all tend to hold on to the negatives because they're the exception. They're the things we don't like about ourselves rather than remembering the things we good about ourselves. And that has nothing to do with what Zach was talking about, but it's what you reminded me of when you said that was being told this whole idea of being grateful for what happened, for expressing the gratitude for what we're right.
are you sure it has nothing to do with it? Because here's the very next question. In the video, Zach mentions how scientists believe that our mental health or lack thereof stems from our brains, and every day our brains go through 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts daily. I'll tell you, mark that down. Yeah, many of which are negative, comparative, and repetitive. In order to defeat those negative thoughts, we must first recognize them. It says then, if comfortable, share a negative, repetitive thought that you come to have. Where do you think you have that thought? I thought it was funny how you were leading right into that next thing. I'm like, that's one thing that Kevin does for me is if I get a letter or something that's full news, something that's kind of crazy and all that stuff, Kevin makes sure I see it and tells me, put it in the file with the rest of it. Like he makes me do that. And he knows that. Or if someone says something nice to me, he writes it down and who said it and makes me put it in there because what do we focus on? The negative stuff, right? Like that's at least
Do you think that's Satan?
it's part of it. I guess.
So I think it's also human nature. When I was in business, someone told me one time was that, and it came to pass directly that they had an evaluation process with they asked all the staff to evaluate their supervisors at one point. And so it was interesting because I did well, negative about it, but they pointed out that what happens with people is that we tend to only notice the negatives because we expect the positive. And so we have a tendency when something is an exception to what we expect, one of it or to attack it. And so they were saying, you can have 10 employees out here and they're all doing a great job. And you don't tell them they're doing a great job. You talk to the ones who make a mistake. And so you're coming across as being negative, but you're really not. Those other people are good. You just need to tell them they're good. And I think that it's Satan, but it's also our human nature to look at the exceptions of our expectations.
And I think, like on Sunday, we talked about like the son of us, which is the Greek Satan. it really means accuser. And there's a lot of times
Yeah, that was a good service.
we thanks.
Write that down in the file.
Write that down.
Yeah, here, hold on. No, let me text Kevin real quick. Like that. But it's no, I appreciate that because it was I wasn't sure how last. I had a lot in my mind just trying to get out of town and all that stuff. But that was another foundational thing that happened in my own spiritual life was when like that accusation was really like this negative, like that's Satan and all that stuff. Like I'm channeling more of that. And I was like, oh, like, I'm really concentrating on a lot of negative on other people too. And that's,
I was thinking about your sermon Sunday about the woman,
yeah.
and it occurred to me, do you think Jesus' answer would have been the same no matter what the sin was? If she had killed someone or she had stolen, it wouldn't matter. There's
I
a
don't
degree of
think so.
sin, right?
Yeah. That's how I was teaching it.
So how does that work in a system where there's laws and law and order?
Ooh, that's a great
Because
question.
we're not, no one should accuse anyone
Mhm.
if we're all sinners, which we
Yeah.
believe we all are. So how does that jive with
I think we're 10 commandments, 6 rules.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. There's a question because I have an example I used to teach in another class we used to talk about. And it's exactly what you're saying. That if you remember back a ways, there was a milkman. He shot a whole school full of little Amish girls in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that happened as a result of that, or after that, was that the Amish families all took food and stuff to the shooter's family because they too were grieving. And they opted to not rebuild the school because in memory of the girls, but they built a new school and then they moved on with it. They prayed for the guy who shot them because he needed help. And I think it's an interesting attitude because what you're saying is true. There are laws that say this is wrong, but our attitude is so bad about the person. And it's hard. It's really.
I guess I kind of thought that the 10 Commandments were basically I don't know if you would call it worse sins, but certainly sins that God specifically spelled out that he didn't want people to do.
Mhm.
He didn't say everything, but he
Yeah.
said the ones that I would assume were the most grievous. And so I was thinking about it this week, and I was thinking, well, then why would we ever prosecute people for crime? And then, but if we didn't prosecute people for crime, what kind of world would we live in?
Yeah. And I think that's,
That reminds me of when they were trying to trap Jesus, and he said,
Please trap.
I don't remember what
no, we want to,
scripture it was.
we'll let Marianne say.
It's me, Lee. Hi. Where he says, "Well, give to Rome what's Rome, and give
Yeah.
to God what's God."
Mm-hmm.
So we have our idea of what sin is, and then you have, the civil authority.
Mm-hmm.
So you have God and you have the civil authority,
Yeah.
and we kind of just run parallel.
Mm-hmm. And Romans goes at length, like after Romans 8, it kind of goes in length about, I think it's after Romans 8, I don't know, in Romans, it really talks a lot about honoring the civil authorities and all that stuff, because God has kind of put them there. And you see that it's consistent with Jesus too. Because like you said, like if we just let it all run amok, it's going to be just a big muddy mess, and we like, there's a lot of stuff we do at the church, and Lee, I'll let you go right here a second. There's a lot of rules that we have at the church that are designed to be so that we can be a cohesive unit of people here. That there are things that yes, we live a forgiveness thing, but there are people that often want to, they don't even intend to, but just their actions are driving the unit into disarray and individualism and all that stuff. And the best example is when I was in seminary, there was a lot of talk about church discipline. You guys know what church discipline is? It's like when you kick someone out of the church, we call that church discipline. And I was really not happy with how we were talking about church discipline because it kind of seemed like, oh, if you just disagree with the pastor, then get out type of thing. And I came across an example of like that I thought was really good was, and this is a general rule, but let's say, there's a mother and a father and they get divorced and they get divorced and they're separated. And then the father comes back. The mom's just trying to make it. She's got the kids, trying to make it to church. And then the father comes in one day with his new girlfriend. That's not good for anybody. It's not good for that group. That's not good. We would probably tell the guy, don't do that. There's like little things, and that's not a hard and fast rule, but it's kind of, you can extrapolate some rules around that. So it's damaging to the body. Lee, you look like you wanted to say something a little bit ago.
When we were talking about laws and following them and how do we deal with that, I think our criminal justice system is the problem. I understand the logistics of it. I understand why we have to do what we have to do, but we're doing it wrong.
Oh.
We're not,
Yeah.
if somebody's caught stealing, yes, not saying there shouldn't be restitution, but why
I
was
see
the
where you're
person, why was the person stealing?
Okay, so
Was he stealing because he got up that morning and said, gee, so-and-so's got an Xbox and I want it? Or did he steal it because he saw his kid brother hungry the night before? And he's going to steal it and sell it so he can bring the money home for his kid brother to have breakfast.
yeah.
Does that matter to God?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think so.
Why?
so I think it does. Because I think there's this longing. So all through the prophets in the Old Testament, there's this longing for justice. Because the prophets are dealing with Israel being in captivity. They're like, it was the generations before us that caused us these problems over there. We're stuck here. And there's this sense that that God is restoring justice to the world. So I think it does matter to God. Just like everything matters to God, just like that woman caught in adultery or like any of that stuff is. But like we said before, like we have to have systems in the world today that uphold like peace, and we know that God works through those things like that. That's where they are upholding peace, and we see that those systems can be corrupted. We can see, you don't have to look very far. It's like one of the favorite movie tropes is that, like that's all the cops are in with the mob, and like that's kind of, I think that's pretty much every Batman. Like that's like over there, and you have like the one honorable cop, type
Not
of
Commissioner
Gordon. Yeah, not Commissioner Gordon. Like he's always the, and so we can see that it gets corrupted, but even in the midst of that corruption is that God is still bringing like peace to the nations through those things. And that's why we stay civically engaged in all of that. So Luther's teaching on the Ten Commandments is that we fail really in each one of them. That's Luther's teaching on the Ten Commandments. And then we also have this setup of kings and in the dominions of the world and all that stuff, and we have to have those people. And if we are in charge, then like that's why I pray the way I do there, that from Mayor Martin, Governor Santos, President Biden, didn't pray for it more. But yeah, well, no, we should pray.
They need a lot of prayer.
Yeah, they need a lot of prayer because yes, I pray that they would
So check
push
out
aside
the
their pursuits of power and pray that they would be good stewards of the people that are in their care. And that's those are hard jobs.
Yes.
Yeah, but you say that before every sermon. You pray and you
Yeah.
ask that the things that come out of your mouth are
Yeah.
inspired by God.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, exactly. And so like that's,
So do you think some sins are worse than others?
I have kind of an equality to sin mentality. There are some there, I could hate you right now and you wouldn't know. If I punched you in the face, you would know. And in our relationship, the punch in the face is worse. Just like if I stole from you or something like that. But yeah, I know, right? But that's that our world, the punch is worse.
But the thinking
But the thinking,
of the thought
Mhm.
is the same as the commission of the act.
Exactly.
So I mean, it just seems to me like that's a fairly slippery slope to
It's really
start
Catholic.
to think about.
It's really
It's
Catholic.
really Catholic.
Yeah, because the Catholics have a whole pecking order of
Oh, like things are worse.
the
than others.
venial sins, and it's lost.
I wonder if it's that.
Sins of omission and commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's what Luther and the reason why he treats the 10 Commandments the way he was.
How does he treat them?
Like that we break them all. And
Oh yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, he also must have had a big problem with the church selling indulgences,
Mhm.
and some sins that were committed were more expensive to expunge than
So like, this actually
the silica out of it.
this actually goes well with what the passage we're going to read here in a second. Luther was probably a little bit on the spectrum, like over there, like all that, and he like that. He probably was because he did this thing. He would he got into the practice where he started realizing that all of his sins were important, like that everything he was doing. So he would go into confession. And the poor priest that he found there, he would confess everything. Like it's all the same. It's all sin, isn't it? Like he's like over there, and the priest was like, "Come on, man!" Like, and then he'd come in the next day and do it all, be in there for hours and just be arduous. And that's Luther getting to that point is when he realized the grace of God, because he's just like, I can't take care of all of these because I like that. That's just it's too many, and that's when and Luther became all about the grace of God. But we got to remember too that people like the Catholic Church, the authorities during his day, Caesar is how we'll label them, was trying to kill Luther for a long time. He translated the Bible from Latin to German, the first translation of the words of the people. When he was held up in the Wittenberg Tower, because people wanted to kill him. And so he couldn't leave that tower because people were like, leave. And he translated like that. And so we have to deal with the punches because it's society. We can't just be a punch, and you can't judge me. You can't judge me based on the feelings of my heart and stuff like that. But I think God can. So I think you have that civic realm, which is what we have to deal with, and God has blessed it, in those things, and we see it good and bad in all of those. We deal with the civic realm when we have our voters meeting and all that stuff, and here, and then we have the sins, and God can even judge our hearts, and God gives us love, all that stuff. I don't know if that's a good answer. But let's go on to Philippians chapter 4, because we're talking about all these thoughts that enter our hearts, that enter our minds. I would say I got it on this computer. And so Philippians chapter 4, I want to read. We'll have it read for us. Really, chapter 4, verses 1 through 20. But I really want to focus on verses 4 through 9. So pay special attention to 4 through 9. But Philippians chapter 4, 1 through 20. we will read together. So here we go. Let me share it. All right. Here we go. Maybe. Oh yeah, it has to reload always. There.
Therefore, my beloved and longed for brethren, my joy and crown, so stand fast in the Lord, beloved. I implore Euodia and I implore Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. And I urge you also, true companion, help these women who labored with me in the gospel, with Clement also and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do. And the God of peace will be with you. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again. Though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Nevertheless, you have done well that you shared in my distress.
We're good there. We're good. So I like how Paul starts talking about contentment there. But in that, what's one of the things, like he's finishing up this very pleasant letter that he has to the Philippians. He's not upset at them. This is the Galatian church. He's upset at them. Like that's, and so, but I think verse 6, it's kind of, he kind of lets on like, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, the prayer and petition. And it kind of goes into what we were talking about earlier. Then what does he, right? He goes, rather than being anxious, like what does he want you to kind of focus on?
The peace of God.
Yeah, like that's like it reminds me of how Kevin goes out of his way to be, for me, it's an active service that Kevin does for me to see those things, and so I do think there's part of it because it's so easy to think about that one thing that someone said, like that just over and over and over in there, and we don't really hear, at least not me, in my mind's eye, of all the good things people have said, even though you guys said something we should write stuff down here, but it's recorded. It's recorded. It is recorded. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? Is that a better way? Like what? Is it just pie in the sky?
What is fine?
Well, like that, to think about the good things rather than just think about all the negative stuff. So,
Well, we need to trainers.
I think when we grow up,
Yeah.
we are conditioned to focus on negative
Mhm.
stuff because that's a way to improve.
Mhm.
If you never thought about your negatives, you wouldn't
Yeah.
ever improve yourself.
Mhm.
But when you realize that it's an overwhelming task, you're never going to be able to do anything well enough to deserve to go to heaven or anything.
Mhm.
Once you realize that, it kind of seems like you may as well focus on the positive because the negative's not going to
Yeah.
ever go
It
away.
just consume you then.
You could be overwhelmed by it.
Mhm.
You got to be able to forgive yourself. And I like that. There's a lot of different scriptures, different in here in this Philippians reading.
Yeah.
But I like the one that sums it up for me, not in Philippians, is in Romans when he says, "The things I want to do, I don't do.
Yeah.
And the things I don't want to do, those are what I do." And you have to be, you're not. The bottom line is you're not going to be perfect in everything. In your word, your thought, your deed, you're going to fall short. You're human. There's a Christian song that says that it cracked me up. The guy says, talking about Jesus, he goes, he's not sitting there shaking his head, writing you off, leaving you lost.
Yeah.
He's not sitting there shaking his head, wishing he never went to that cross. And when I heard that, I laughed right out loud when I heard that. I was like,
Yeah.
that, because that's what people will think of themselves. And when I have bad interactions with work, I mean, at work specifically, dealing with a lot of different personalities,
Mhm.
and I'll have a day where an interaction didn't go as good,
Mhm.
but that's how it went.
Yeah.
You don't have a time machine. You can't go back in time and you can't change.
Mhm.
You can try and do better the next time when you're thinking about choking this person in your head. If they don't stop talking,
God knows.
maybe next time
I did.
you won't think that
Yeah.
thought, but you probably will.
Mhm.
And you have to be able to just forgive yourself and roll with that tide of grace
Mhm.
and say, okay, you know what? Could have done that better.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll work on that next. They spend too much time.
Worry about that.
Yeah. And you know that in the program that you have to be able to you've got to forgive yourself. My God, you wouldn't get anywhere if you didn't forgive yourself. You know?
When Jesus was praying before he was crucified,
Mhm.
he had what I consider like a human emotion of, God, please take this.
Oh,
away
Yeah,
from me.
exactly.
And we all do that. The difference was he accepted God's
Mhm.
will, where we try to bargain and oppose.
Weasel our way out.
Figure out an easier, softer way.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
excellent program. God grant me the serenity to accept
Right.
the things I cannot change, the courage to change things I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Mhm.
The only person we can change is ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Right.
everybody else. We have to let go of.
That what you said right there is one of the biggest things I tell people when we'll call it counseling, like through them, is like you can only do the only thing you can worry about is yourself. Like that's
But it's not in a me kind of way.
No,
It's like,
no.
no,
Right.
because we've gotten into so much meanness
Yeah.
in this whole generation. It's all about me. It's all about me. And that's not, the serenity prayer is really not about me.
no, it's not about,
Right.
but so often we try to control everyone else around us.
Right. And
know?
Yeah. No,
And-
that'll get you
and-
very fast.
Yeah, and that's what I talk to people about. It's like the only thing you got control of, and I do that
It's
as
my husband.
yeah. It's so.
It's not for lack of trying.
But we try, and I usually say that to people because I'm trying to be that as gospel to them. That it's, they have something really hard that they have to go through.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing that you don't, whether they like you or they don't, whatever happens with it, like the only thing you got control of is yourself. And that's okay. Like that's right.
No, it is.
Yeah. And like
That's why I do it, because the serenity prayer out in my space area for a long time on my computer simply said the wisdom of the difference.
Yeah.
You know the rest of it, that's the part.
Yeah.
See that, you go, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I can't change this. know the difference.
Mm-hmm. That's because that's the hardest challenge. Like, so, like, going back to what Jay said earlier about, like, well, what's, we're talking about the sin with God versus dealing with ourselves. And we're in the midst of that tension. We're in the midst of that tension, and we're talking about having this attitude of God in the middle of service, and yet we live in society, we live with one another, whereas there's certain decorum even of being in this room together, that one of us could probably really throw that off and make it awkward for everyone else, like you have this decorum, and I think I came to this realization probably 6 or 7 years ago now, that there's a holiness, a sacredness in the tension. Like that, what you're talking about, the very human prayer of Jesus. Like, I think like his humanness is full display. I think that was a good example. Like that you see the tension, and we're all in the midst of that holiness, that tension, like every day. And I think that's kind of what Paul, as he's closing this letter out to the Philippians, he's like, it's like, put aside, like, look at the good things here, or it'll take you down bad roads. And Paul by no means is the saying deny the sin in your life. Like, that's not what he's doing at all. But he's doing all these things. Yeah. Let's see. What time is it? Oh, we're done with time. So we were going to read this, and I'll just read it out loud. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve that it's what God's will is good and pleasing, perfect will." The context around Romans 12:2 is kind of fascinating how it builds around that. But I think that pattern of the world oftentimes is that just everything's falling apart, because we talked about it for a little bit, but think about when we were all running around in the woods. We always had to be cautious. Is there a leopard, something's going to get me, out over there? And you just continue with this feeling of that there's danger. You got to focus on it, but it can just make it seem like everything is dangerous.
What you want to do is today, so you should want to.
Yeah, and that's why it's so refreshing when someone actually says a word of kindness to you, and that's and that because it things do feel so dangerous. It's so refreshing, Gary. Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. So, yeah, like that. So yeah. So I think that my attitude of Jesus as we go through there, like, I think it helps us see how Jesus looked at that woman. How Jesus looked at that woman in the story from Sunday, like how Jesus looks at each one of us. And often my prayer is that even when I'm frustrated, I make jokes about it, like the scanning of the UPC symbols and stuff like that, they're doing it wrong. I make jokes about it, but it's so easy to judge that people aren't going fast enough at the light, or something that's actually important.
Mm-hmm.
And we go like, well, how does Jesus look at this person? And it could slow us down and go, things aren't as bad. God loves me. God loves them. It's a good thing God loves them. He's probably the only one. But that's beside the point. Yeah. For everyone that's watching online, it seems like a good place to end over there. You guys have a good day. Thanks for joining us.